Hey, if you needed more motivation to have the best DC summer ever, this is it. District Bridges' Summer Bucket List runs June 15th to August 15th across DC. Here's how it works. Earn points and climb District Bridges' leaderboard by supporting local businesses, attending cool events, and crossing things off your summer bucket list. Top players can earn up to $250 in local business gift cards just by visiting pools, exploring museums, and sipping frozen cocktails. It's the ultimate DC staycation. Show some love for the city we call home. Join the Summer Bucket List and celebrate what makes DC truly special. Sign up now and track your progress at districtbridges.org/DC Summer Bucket List.
Today on CityCast DC. On Monday, the National Park Service announced plans to close Dupont Circle Park during this year's Pride celebration. But after swift backlash from the public and elected officials, they reversed course the very next day, confirming that Dupont Circle would remain open for Pride festivities. It's just one more wrinkle in what's already a complicated Pride season under the current administration. This year, Pride feels different, and few people can speak to that better than Deacon Maccubbin, a DC native and a true icon of Washington's LGBTQ+ history. Deacon helped organize the city's very first gay pride party back in 1975. Nearly 50 years later, he reflects on what's changed and what stayed the same about pride in the nation's capital. Today is Wednesday, June 4th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is talking about. Deacon, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk Pride with you.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Okay, so World Pride in DC this year marks the 50th anniversary of Pride in DC. That's a long time. And the first DC Pride was actually started by you in 1975.
Yes, I'm guilty. Guilty as charged.
I mean, I feel like I have a lot personally to thank you for, but take me back to the first Pride in DC in 1975. I can only imagine the way that it's changed, the ways that it stayed the same. Paint me a picture. What was the vibe?
Well, the vibe was celebration. The vibe was joy. But the vibe was also that we've got a lot of work to do. We had to have Pride that year here because we had a lot of work to do. We had been going to Pride in New York for several years at that point and always enjoyed it. And so we had a little bit of background about what could happen with the Pride March, the way that people who had never been in such a gathering before would just blossom, being among all their friends and relatives in some cases and other people that were celebrating. So we knew how important that was from our own experiences. And so when somebody suggested that we do one here in Washington instead of just always going to New York, I leapt at the idea. I thought it was a great idea. And the very next day, I started working on it. We didn't have any sponsors. We had one sponsor. The one sponsor we had was our own bookstore, a little 300 square foot bookstore that had been in business for only a year at that point. They put up a little bit of seed money in order for us to get started. It paid for flyers and ads in the Blade and things of that nature.
So the bookstore is Lambda Rising.
Yes, that's right.
How did it come to be?
Lambda Rising came to be because, again, I was in New York in 1971 at a Pride event, and I accidentally stumbled upon a little shop called Oscar Wilde Bookstore. Oscar Wilde Memorial Bookstore, it was called. That was the very first gay and lesbian bookstore anywhere in the country. It was opened in 1967 by Craig Rodwell. Craig had actually been at Stonewall the night of the riot. He wasn't participating in it, but he had been there and witnessed it all. And a year later, he started the first Pride March in New York. When I first walked into that little bookstore, I thought, this is really a neat idea. I think someday maybe Washington should have a store like this. Now, I point out that they probably only had 24 books on the shelf at the time. It was a very tiny little place. But everything was devoted to learning about the gay and lesbian experience. And to me, that was a very important key in how to move the movement forward. And so 3 years later, in 1974, a space became available in a building where I had another shop. And I thought, what the heck, let's give it a shot and see whether it works or not. So we opened a store. I think we put $3,000 into it ourselves, and we borrowed $1,000 from a gay activist. And with that little bit of money, we were able to open a store. It had about 250 titles on the shelf. It was in a 300 square foot space, but it was home for people because for the first time, there was a place they could turn for information, for stories, to read about other people's lives that were like their own. And that was a huge step forward for the community. And the bookstore worked very, very well. Like I say, a year later, we were able to sponsor the first Pride event, which was a big deal.
It sounds like spaces like Lambda Rising were important to the first iteration of Pride in DC. Like, it makes me sad to think about the state of gay and lesbian bookstores both in DC and nationally. Like, I feel like it's something that is harder to find, these spaces that are so integral to how the community is able to express itself.
Well, there's a couple of aspects to that. When we started Lambda Rising, we did so because we went to bookstores and couldn't find gay books. In fact, there was a community bookshop right in Dupont Circle, and I went in and asked one day, where do you have your gay books stored? And the guy looked down his nose at me, literally, pulled his glasses down on his nose and went, "We don't carry those kind of books."
Oh, Lord.
And, I know what he thought I was asking for, but that wasn't what I was asking for. I was asking for James Baldwin and Gore Vidal and what have you. Then I went to the library, and they had a lot of books in the card catalog, if you remember what the card catalog is.
Oh, yes.
But they weren't on the shelf. We couldn't find them. And so I asked the librarian where they were, and she said, "We can't keep them in stock." Two things that happened. One, people that are homophobic come in and tear the pages out of them and throw them in the trash and steal them and throw them away. And two, gay people come in and they're embarrassed to check them out, so they just take them. And that was the situation. If you wanted to read gay stories, you couldn't find them. They weren't there. And so we knew that there was a need for this. And what we thought was, we'll start a gay bookstore. We'll prove to writers and publishers that there's a need for these stories. There's a market for them out there. And sooner or later, they'll write more stories, they'll publish more stories, and bookstores will see that there's profit to be made in them, and they'll start carrying those stories. And eventually, there'll be no need for a gay and lesbian bookstore, because everybody will have them. 35 years later, we said, mission accomplished. The books were available on the internet. The books were available in bookstores generally. So you can find them in bookstores now pretty generally. However, there's still a need for gay and lesbian bookstores, because there's a need for that community center feeling that people get when they walk into a gay and lesbian bookstore. It's really unique. It's a community center, and Lambda Rising was a community center before we ever had a community center in Washington. Fortunately, we have one now. But there are gay bookstores opening now all the time. We have 3 in Washington right now. They're all small, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with a smaller store. They're opening all over the place, actually, including in some fairly small areas.
That's so important, and I'm glad that you said that. It can be easy to feel like the progress that the community has made is being sort of chipped away and rolling back, but it's good to remember that we are lucky to have the spaces that we have in DC, and that there's new spaces opening up every day, and that can be sort of a beacon at a time when things don't always feel so rosy. I'm sure you saw the news that came out on Monday night about the National Park Service closing Dupont Circle during Pride. People, myself included, were pretty mad about it. Then on Tuesday, the Park Service reversed course after getting pushback from local elected officials. You know, you've been celebrating Pride here in DC for years. What is your take on this sort of move, then reversal going on here?
It was a very rude wake-up call that I got Tuesday morning when I first heard about this. They plotted to fence off Dupont Circle, an idea that has been central to our history as a joyful people in the middle of World Pride. But as Mayor Bowser noted last week, DC is the gayest city in the country. And our allies on the DC Council immediately got to work and asked the NPS to rescind their order, and they did. Within 24 hours, they had repealed the order, and they are not going to be fencing off Dupont Circle. We're very grateful to them for having taken that quick action. Particularly to Brooke Pinto and Zachary Parker, who were key in getting it rescinded. And now we can move forward and celebrate our history. Now, there are still problems with the National Park Service. For example, on their website, they used to have a whole lot of history about the LGBTQ plus community in Dupont Circle, and they deleted all the references to transgender people from that history. Again, trying to rewrite history, actual history. We can't let that stand. We have to keep pushing against it.
Absolutely. And it's good that we do have elected officials who can help do the work of, just letting folks gather and celebrate. Do you know anything about how they were able to respond so quickly, specifically Parker and Pinto?
No, I actually don't know yet, but I plan to find out. I certainly will have calls into their offices to find out. I'm curious about that, but it was swift action. It's what happens when you elect good people to office. Maybe the nation could take a clue from that.
I will say, I've seen it with my own eyes. Dupont Circle, after not just Pride, but any big event in that part of town, it is a mess. Is there something that Pride organizers and officials could have done differently to avoid this cancellation, the anger about it, and then the reversal?
Well, if MPS wants to do something about that, all they need to do is station a few officers at key points in the circle. They also should put out additional trash cans because they never have enough trash cans.
Never.
For a large
Never.
gathering. I will point out that the one time, and really it's just one time, that the circle was absolutely trashed was last year. And that happened after the Pride event was over. The Pride event went through the area and was over, and the park was fairly, other than some trash around, it was fairly pristine at that point. And then another party of people came in later, and they're the ones that trashed the circle. So far, while the Pride organization has been involved or been in charge of the circle, that has not happened.
One of Shakespeare's classics is now playing at the Folger Theater in a production you do not want to miss. The Folger's production of Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's great comedy about loss, love, and identity, is given a modern-day twist in this production, set in an underground club in a faltering empire, and it's full of joyful excess and lavish costumes. I'm telling you, you are going to leave this play wheezing from all the laughs and gasps. The Washington Post called it shamelessly entertaining, vibrant, and big-hearted. Y'all know I love going to plays, and DC's theater scene is absolutely on fire right now. Performances are on now and run through June 22nd, but tickets are going fast. So get yours today at folger.edu/12thnight. That's folger.edu/12thnight.
If you are a CityCast superfan, you've definitely heard us singing the praises of our longtime supporter, Paulson & Nace. So there's big news. Paulson & Nace is now Nace Law Group. Same great team, just with a new name. When you are hurt by the negligence of others, you want a lawyer that will actually fight for you, not one that will settle for the bare minimum. Nace's compassionate lawyers fight to bring cases to juries, so you can get everything you deserve. If you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Nace Law Group for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.washingtondcinjurylawyers.com or call 202-463-1999.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
So now it's 2025, and you're the Grand Marshal of World Pride in DC, this thing that you started in DC 50 years ago. So much have changed, but the politics have changed, the laws have changed. How different does Pride feel to you now in 2025?
Well, it's a lot bigger. The first one was only 2,000 people, which was amazing at the time. But now we have, I think last year we had 250,000 people that participated in the Pride weekend. I don't know how many we're going to have this time. There's supposedly more. So it's a lot bigger. It also has a lot more corporate sponsorship. This year, we're having a little problem with that because some of the corporations that have consistently sponsored us in the past are kind of edging back and being a bit standoffish. Shame on them for doing that. But nonetheless, there are plenty of people who are supporting the event financially, and that's really good. The parade is different. We didn't have a parade in the first 5 years or so. Now we have a parade as well as the street festival aspect. Of course, this year with World Pride, we have weeks of events. Every single day and night, there are things going on throughout the city. I can't possibly go to all of them, but I'm trying to go to as many as I possibly can.
I want to talk more about this corporate sponsorship angle because it is a little bit of a complexity. You know, it's good to remember that the first Pride was a riot, right? It was not this like big corporate event. At times in the past, I've gone to Pride and thought, wow, you've got like Raytheon sponsoring Pride. Interesting. Now, as we know, the Trump administration is not the friendliest to the community. And so there's this undercurrent of these big corporate sponsors that have taken up so much space in Pride's past now pulling out. Booz Allen pulled out of DC Pride. Marriott is still a sponsor, but they don't want their signage being used. What are your thoughts on this?
Obviously, I have negative feelings about those who pulled out. No question about it. I don't shop at Target anymore.
Oh, me neither. They'll never get a dime of my money.
And they're hurting because of it. They thought they were going to avoid a boycott from the right. And what happened was they found out their customers from the right and the left are boycotting them now.
Right.
So, because they dropped DEI. I'm not opposed to corporate sponsorship at all. I mean, because I know how expensive it is to put on a Pride event. It is expensive. Even in the early days, it was comparatively expensive to do that. And there's not a whole lot of ways to earn money from doing it because it has to be kept free. Otherwise, it's not Pride. So if you keep it free and the city asks you to put up insurance money for it and there's rent to be paid and there's security to be considered, it's an expensive operation, and it's hard to do without some corporate sponsorship along the way somewhere. So I'm not opposed to that. Yes, it makes me feel uncomfortable, and if the NRA wanted to sponsor us, I would be uncomfortable with that, and I'd say no. But I think you have to have some flexibility. I was not happy when, for example, the police were not allowed to march in the Pride Parade one year if they were in uniform, because we've spent so many years trying to build up a liaison within the police force and to improve policing with regard to the LGBTQ community. And yeah, we haven't been 100% successful, but we have made huge progress in that regard. And because of that, I want to see that progress continue. And it best continues if you let people participate. I think that's important.
Well, I mean, as someone who has a very long time perspective, who has been in this movement for so long, I can imagine, and please let me know if this is not correct, I can imagine that maybe some younger voices in the movement might say, oh, police have no business at Pride. If you are a police officer in uniform, we don't want you marching with us. But you're actually offering a little bit of a different perspective. Do I have that right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I definitely understand the sentiment. I do understand the sentiment. And I'm sympathetic to it. But again, we have spent years trying to... The first time I ever got arrested for civil disobedience was right here in Washington, D.C., when a group of us decided that we were going to meet with the police chief, and he didn't want to meet with us. We were going to meet with the police chief to talk about harassment of the community. And for years, he refused to meet with representatives of the community. And so one day we went down to his office and said, we're here to see the chief of police. And they said, he's in Chicago. And we said, well, that's okay, we'll wait. And we sat out and waited. And at 5:00 in the afternoon, they told us that they were closing the office and we would be arrested if we stayed. And 3 of us had agreed that we were not going to leave. Everybody else left, but 3 of us were not going to leave. And so we were arrested for unlawful entry and taken down to jail. And when it came to trials later, we played no contendory because we had actually been guilty. We knew that. But it gave us an opportunity to explain to the judge why we had done what we did. And the judge came back into the chambers and said, because you played no contendory, I have no choice but to find you guilty. But if I had been in your position, I'd probably have done the same thing. No fine, no jail time. You're free to go.
Wow.
2 weeks later, the police chief met with us. So that started a conversation that resulted in the police gay and lesbian liaison unit being formed and having an office in Dupont Circle so that they could respond to homophobic harassment instantly, in many cases. That worked really, really well for a long, long time, and it still works really, really well today.
Well, I want to talk a bit more about that because I love Pride, and when I've gone, it feels, the celebration and the joy that you were talking about when we started this conversation. I really feel that, like, it oftentimes feels like a party, and sometimes the community needs a party. But I'm wondering, with so much happening with the Trump administration, with the community being under attack in so many ways, in this particular political moment, do you feel like this year's iteration of Pride might need to feel like a fight again, like those protest riot roots?
Yes, I do, actually. We're going to have a parade Saturday, and Sunday we're going to have a march. And both of those things are crucial. I remember what it was like in 1993 when we had the massive March on Washington, the Gay and Lesbian March on Washington, which was probably 1 million people, and the city was packed with people, and that was totally a protest. It wasn't a celebration. And yet we celebrated because just having 1 million people together for a cause is a celebration in and of itself. We need a celebration. We need the joy, absolutely. And it's the gay community. Come on. It's gays, lesbians, and bisexuals and transgenders all together in this community. And we also need the political activity. We need to organize. We need to fight like the devil to improve our lot in America. And we have made huge progress on that over the past 50 and 60 years. Don't forget that the very first LGBTQ demonstration, and in that case it was gays and lesbians, the very first gay and lesbian demonstration at the White House happened only 60 years ago, in 1965. And it included only 10 people. 10 people marched a picket line in front of the White House that year. And look where we've come in the intervening 60 years.
As someone who's been here in D.C. on the front lines of this from the start, what are some of your favorite stories about D.C.'s Pride history or memories from that time? I mean, I can only imagine some of the stuff you've experienced.
I know in the first year, we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't really know how people were going to respond in D.C. D.C. is kind of a buttoned-down place. It's a little bit conservative in a lot of ways. So we weren't sure how many people would actually show up. And about maybe 5 or 10 minutes before it was supposed to actually start, there was very few people on the street. And my cohort at the time, Bob Carpenter, who had helped me organize some of the parts of Pride, he was fretting because he said that nobody's going to come. There's nobody going to be here. I said, don't worry, Bob. They're all in gay time. They'll be here. And 15 minutes later, there were 2,000 people in the middle of the street. That was a really memorable time. Another memorable time was, I think it might have been the third or fourth, it could have even been the fifth Pride. I sponsored it for the first 5 years. And I was the sole sponsor for it for the first 5 years. And one of those years, I had the flu, and I was sick as a dog. But I still got up and worked the microphone and put the party on, and then went home to bed for a week. I mean, it was really a tough year. That was a tough year personally for me. I've loved the fact that it grew so large. By the fifth year, there were 10,000 people coming, and we had 3 blocks of the streets that were roped off, and it was too many people for the space. And so I knew that we couldn't continue to do it there on 20th Street. And at that time, there was an organization called P Street Festival that was thinking about putting something together of their own. And so I turned the checkbook and everything else over to P Street Festival. And then the next year they did it at Francis School, which was a much bigger area that could hold more people. And it was done there for several years. And then eventually it moved to other locations through the city and through other hands too, because Whitman Walker had it for a while, but it's continued every single year. And that alone is amazing for 50 years that we've been doing this.
Definitely. Deacon, I have kind of a strange question for you. So when I was first asking you about the earliest iterations of DC Pride, you said that, you had been used to going to New York City for Pride, and you thought, why can't DC have this? You really are speaking to a personal feeling that I feel a lot of, DC, we're pretty close to New York. I spend a lot of time in New York. I'm back and forth pretty regularly. Oftentimes, I will think to myself, why do I have to take a train to New York City to experience XYZ? Why can't we have this in DC? How much of the first iteration of DC Pride was that very feeling of like, I shouldn't have to get on a bus or a train. We should have this right here in the district?
Actually, I don't think it was approached from that standpoint. It was just approached from the standpoint of we should have a celebration like that here. Now, we just got back from a trip to Alaska. We had a wonderful time. We were going for 3 weeks. And we wound up in a little town called Seward, Alaska, which has a population of less than 3,000 people. And while we were there, they happened to be holding a mermaid festival, which was co-sponsored by the Gay Alliance of Seward. Wherever you go, everywhere in the country, Front Royal is having a Pride event this year. Front Royal is a tiny little place in a very, very red area, a very pro-Trump area, and they're doing a Pride there this year. Little towns all around America are doing Pride events now. And I guess they could come to Washington if they wanted to celebrate, or they could go to New York, or they could go to Philadelphia, but they want to do it here. They want to do it at home. They want their neighbors and their friends to be there. That's huge. That's very, very important. It's a really good organizing tool.
Well, Deacon, thank you so much for all that you've done to preserve and celebrate DC's queer community here in the district. I feel like I owe you a great debt of gratitude. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you at Pride.
You will see me there. I will be there. I might be in a wheelchair, but I'll be there.
Grand Marshal.
Thank you very much.
And also, leave us a voicemail at 202-642-2654 if you have any questions that we can help answer in an upcoming episode. We got a voicemail from one concerned listener about how the Dupont deckover will be affecting bus lines. And we're talking to DDOT soon to get into the weeds of how all of these major transportation shakeups will affect each other. And if you've got questions too, leave us a voicemail at 202-642-2654. Or you can email a voice memo to dc@citycast.fm. Once again, that's 202-642-2654, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share it with a friend who's excited for Pride? You can rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.